My brother Vince is 8 years older than I am. And one day I'm going through his boxes in the basement, and there was this book that had an image on it I'd never seen, looked like me. And it was Haki Madhubuti's We Walk the Way of the New World. And that's the first non-Bible, non-newspaper kind of book that I remember reading. And I remember reading those poems. He had an essay in there called No Knock, where he's talking about revolution. And he said that 12 midnight is just like 12 noon, only darker. And if you really want to make a significant impact in the world, you'll find that the 24 hours in a day are like the seconds in a fast minute. And I began to read that stuff and go, wow. And at about the same time, I found a book called Cavalcade of Poetry. And it had I tried to read it because my brother had to read it, I guess, for school. And there was a poem in there, and it said, I saw a man pursuing the horizon, round and round they sped, and it bothered me. So I accosted the man. You can't. You lie, he cried, and ran on. And for some reason that, I'm in elementary school, that poem stuck in my head. And going through the things that you go through of being taken from the foster home and living here and eventually moving across to the Midwest from the East Coast, I was getting in all the trouble kids get into because I was away from home, I was away from family, I was away from friends. And I saw a Malcolm X record called The Last Message. And it said Last Message, had him at the podium, and it was the speech he gave in Detroit the day after his home was bombed. And I heard that and I said, wow, Malcolm is the smartest guy in the world. And in 8th grade, I can remember going to the school library and asking about this guy named Lumumba, and finding out that in the upstairs in like the storage room, there were all these bound copies of Time magazine from the 50s and 60s. They were red with gold Time on it. And there were all of these encyclopedias and things that nobody wanted. And because I went to a poor school, as long as you didn't cause any trouble, you could do what you wanted to do. And I can remember staying up there all day long by myself, skipping class, because nobody cared, not going to class, right? Reading these things about Lumumba and the Congo and Kenyatta and all these people, right? And then thinking, wow, well, if he's the smartest guy in the world, I need to be smart. And then saying, well, I need to learn more stuff, and saw this guy, Alan Watts, and I began to read Zen, and Haki Madhubuti was Donnell Lee at the time, right? And then reading Donnell Lee, and all this stuff was just in the library. I don't remember going to the public library as an elementary and high school student. But I do remember that the school library was my refuge because I wasn't doing anything in my classes. I had a teacher, one of the biggest issues in my home, I got in so much trouble because he called my parents to come to school, and he said I was the greatest underachiever he ever had because I was getting an A in his class, his speech class, because I'm reading Malcolm. They can't mess with me and whatnot. I'm reading Martin Luther King, in whatever, 9th grade. They can't mess with me, right? What high school is going to compete with that? And he said I was the greatest underachiever he ever had because I was getting A's in his class and didn't buy the book, never got the book. Didn't need the book. I was reading Time magazine, I'm reading Malcolm, I'm reading Donnell Lee, I'm reading Nikki Giovanni. And so literature saved my life because I wasn't a math guy, I wasn't a science guy and all that. But I understood that if I really needed to figure it out, if they could write it down, I could read it and figure out how to do it. And so I read myself into an education in spite of what was going on in my school. And when I finally got into college, my English teacher told me that I wouldn't make it the first semester because his son had gone to my university and did not make it. And I remember the pride when I went back and told him that I made it my first semester. But again, I could read my way through because I knew if they wrote it down, I knew I could read it because Malcolm could do it, And so that's my life, my literary life. And, but very much it started because, I had this foster father, and he was too old to convince me that I was only valuable because I could throw a ball. I had a foster mother who loved me too much to let me just run the streets, right? And so that's my literary life. And today, I still have much better communion with books than I do with most people. And when I think about my fantasy trips or my fantasy life, would be spending time with some of those great authors.